My name is Claire, and at 57 years old, I thought I had seen enough of life to handle whatever came my way. 3 years after losing my husband David to lung cancer, I had settled into a quiet routine in my 4-bedroom home in Littleton, Colorado. My daughter Sarah had always been my pride and joy, the kind of child every mother dreams of having. She was smart, responsible, and had built a successful career in marketing after graduating from the University of Colorado. But looking back now, I realize that sometimes the people we love most can put us in the most dangerous situations. I never thought that loving my daughter unconditionally could almost cost me everything I had worked for my entire life. Before I share this story with you, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories like this one. Because what I'm about to tell you will show you that sometimes even the deepest love needs boundaries, and sometimes saying no is the most loving thing you can do. I had been working in the insurance industry for 25 years when David passed away. And through careful saving and smart investments, we had managed to build a comfortable life. Our home in Littleton was worth about $800,000, representing everything we had worked toward together. After David died, the house felt enormous, but it was filled with memories I was not ready to let go of. Sarah was 32 when she met Marcus at a business conference in Denver 2 years ago. She came home that evening, glowing in a way I had not seen since she was a teenager, talking about her first crush. Marcus was 35 tall, well-dressed, and had a way of speaking that made everything sound important and exciting. He claimed to be an entrepreneur, always talking about his next big venture or investment opportunity. When Sarah first brought Marcus home for dinner, something felt off to me. Maybe it was the way he looked around our house, taking mental notes of everything valuable, or how he steered every conversation back to money and success. But Sarah was happier than I had seen her in years, and after losing David, I did not want to be the person who questioned her joy. They got engaged after just 6 months of dating and married 2 months later in a small ceremony. Even though Marcus had promised to handle all the wedding expenses, I ended up paying $15,000 when his supposed business funds did not materialize. Sarah apologized profusely, saying Marcus was just having a temporary cash flow problem. The warning signs were there from the beginning, but I missed them because I was looking through the eyes of a loving mother rather than a cautious observer. Sarah had always been independent with her finances, but after marrying Marcus, she became secretive about money. She would change the subject whenever I asked about their financial situation, and she stopped sharing details about her work promotions or salary increases like she used to. Marcus had convinced her to buy a townhouse in Highlands Ranch for $450,000, with Sarah putting down $90,000 from her savings account. I remember feeling proud that my daughter was building equity in real estate, not knowing that this would become the foundation of a much larger problem. During family dinners, Marcus dominated conversations, often interrupting Sarah when she spoke and making decisions for both of them without consulting her. He had opinions about everything, from what Sarah should order at restaurants to which friends she should spend time with. Looking back, I can see that he was systematically isolating her from the people who cared about her. Most starting with small suggestions that gradually became demands. By their first wedding anniversary, Sarah had stopped seeing most of her college friends, claiming she was too busy with work and marriage to maintain those relationships. The first real warning came on a Tuesday evening in October when Sarah called me with trembling in her voice. She explained that Marcus had encountered some difficulties with his latest business venture, something involving cryptocurrency trading that I did not fully understand. They needed $20,000 temporarily to cover some unexpected expenses, and she asked if I could help them out. The way she spoke was different from how she usually asked for things. There was a desperation in her voice that I had never heard before, mixed with what sounded like fear. Against my better judgment, I agreed to lend them the money, but I insisted that Marcus sign a promissory note documenting the loan. When I mentioned this condition to Sarah, she became quiet for a long moment before saying she would talk to Marcus about it. The next day, Marcus called me directly, his tone friendly but firm, as he explained that requiring paperwork for family loans showed a lack of trust. He made me feel like I was being unreasonable for wanting legal documentation, saying that families should operate on faith and love rather than contracts and signatures. Looking back, this was the moment when I should have recognized the manipulation. But Marcus had a way of making his unreasonable requests sound perfectly logical. He convinced me that asking for documentation would hurt Sarah's feelings and create unnecessary tension in their marriage. So I transferred the $20,000 without any written agreement, telling myself that this was what loving mothers do for their children. Marcus promised they would pay me back within 60 days, but those 60 days came and went without any mention of repayment. 1 month later, Sarah called again this time, needing $35,000 for what she described as an investment opportunity that could not wait. Marcus had found a chance to buy into a tech startup, she explained, but they needed to act immediately or lose the opportunity forever. When I asked to speak with Marcus directly about this investment, Sarah said he was in meetings all day but would call me back that evening. He never called, and when I brought it up the next time I saw them, Marcus brushed off my questions with vague explanations about confidentiality agreements and time-sensitive deals. The change in Sarah became more noticeable during this period. She had lost weight, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she seemed constantly distracted during our conversations. When we had lunch together, she would check her phone every few minutes, responding to text messages with quick, nervous taps. She stopped talking about her job with the same enthusiasm she used to have, and when I asked about her work, her answers were brief and lacking detail. Mrs. Henderson, who had been our neighbor for 30 years, mentioned that she had heard Sarah and Marcus arguing loudly in their driveway late one evening. She described Marcus as aggressive and said Sarah seemed to be pleading with him about something. My best friend Dorothy, who had known Sarah since she was a little girl, pulled me aside after church one Sunday to express her concerns. She said something about Marcus just felt wrong to her, though she could not put her finger on exactly what it was. Dorothy mentioned that Marcus never seemed to listen when other people spoke, always waiting for his turn to talk about himself instead of engaging in genuine conversation. These observations from people I trusted started to plant seeds of doubt in my mind, but I still was not ready to confront the possibility that my daughter might be in serious trouble. The situation escalated dramatically when Sarah called me at 2 o'clock on a Thursday morning, sobbing so hard that I could barely understand her words. Between gasps and tears, she explained that Marcus had lost everything in a cryptocurrency investment that had gone terribly wrong. They needed $100,000 immediately to cover their debts and save their financial situation. This time the amount was so large that it shocked me into a moment of clarity. I told Sarah that we needed to sit down together, all three of us, to discuss this properly before I could consider such a significant loan. When I refused to immediately transfer the money, Sarah's crying intensified, and I could hear Marcus shouting in the background. She begged me to reconsider, saying that their marriage and their future depended on my help. The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking, but something about the situation felt orchestrated in a way that made me uncomfortable. I stood my ground and insisted on an in-person meeting, which clearly upset both of them. Sarah hung up without saying goodbye, something she had never done before in her entire life. The next afternoon, Marcus appeared at my front door, without calling ahead. His jaw set in a way that immediately put me on edge. Sarah stood slightly behind him, her eyes red from crying, and her posture defensive. Marcus walked into my living room without being invited and began explaining their financial situation with a tone that was more demanding than requesting. He laid out numbers and percentages and talked about market fluctuations in a way that was clearly intended to confuse rather than clarify. When I asked specific questions about where the money had gone and why they needed such a large amount, his answers became vague, and his voice took on an edge of irritation. During this conversation, Sarah remained almost completely silent, only speaking when Marcus looked at her expectantly. She would not make eye contact with me, instead staring at her hands or at the floor while Marcus did all the talking. When I directly asked Sarah what she thought about the situation, Marcus answered for her, saying that she agreed with his assessment and supported his plan completely. The dynamic between them made me deeply uncomfortable, and I began to see clearly that something was very wrong in their relationship. That evening, after they left, I called my bank to check on recent transactions and discovered something that made my stomach drop. Sarah had withdrawn $45,000 from the savings account that I had set up for her when she was a child, an account that still had my name on it for emergency access. She had emptied it completely without mentioning it to me, and I realized that the money problems were much more serious than they had admitted. I also learned from my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, that Sarah and Marcus had been showing their house to real estate agents, though Sarah had never mentioned anything to me about selling their home. The next week brought the shocking news that they had indeed sold their townhouse for $380,000. After paying off their mortgage and closing costs, they walked away with about $220,000 in cash. Instead of using this money to solve their supposed financial problems, Sarah had given every penny to Marcus for another one of his investment schemes. They had nowhere to live and appeared at my door with suitcases asking if they could stay with me for a few weeks while they looked for a new place. Marcus had found a private investigator's report in my kitchen drawer that revealed his previous 2 marriages had ended under similar circumstances. Both ex-wives had loaned him substantial amounts of money that were never repaid, and both had lost significant assets before the marriages ended in divorce. This pattern of behavior showed that what was happening to Sarah was not bad luck or poor financial decisions, but rather a calculated scheme that Marcus had used successfully before. 3 weeks after moving into my home, Marcus's true nature became impossible to ignore. He had transformed from a temporary house guest into someone who acted like he owned the place. He rearranged furniture without asking, used my computer for hours at a time, and expected me to prepare meals for him as if I were his personal housekeeper. When I gently suggested that he might help with household chores or contribute to groceries, he laughed and said that as family, we should all contribute according to our abilities, implying that my contribution should be financial while his was intellectual. The morning that changed everything started with Marcus cornering me in the kitchen while Sarah was upstairs showering. He had clearly planned this conversation, spreading papers across the kitchen table and launching into a presentation about an amazing business opportunity that required immediate action. He wanted me to take out a home equity loan for $200,000, which he would use to start a consulting firm that would supposedly generate enough profit to pay me back with 10% interest annually. His presentation was polished and professional, clearly something he had done many times before. When I firmly refused to mortgage my home for his business venture, Marcus's demeanor shifted completely. The charming entrepreneur disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. He accused me of being selfish and not caring about my daughter's future happiness. He said that if I truly loved Sarah, I would do whatever it took to help her husband succeed. His voice grew louder and more aggressive as he explained that families are supposed to support each other unconditionally, and that my refusal showed how little I valued my relationship with my daughter. I stood my ground and told Marcus that he had exactly 1 week to find alternative housing for himself and Sarah. I explained that I would not be providing any more financial assistance and that their welcome in my home was coming to an end. Marcus's face turned red with anger, and he began pacing around the kitchen while muttering about ungrateful in-laws and family loyalty. Sarah came downstairs during this confrontation, and when she saw the tension in the room, she immediately began apologizing for any inconvenience they had caused. What happened next revealed the depth of Marcus's control over my daughter. Sarah actually got down on her knees in my living room and begged me to reconsider helping them financially. Tears streamed down her face as she promised that Marcus would pay me back, and that this would be the last time they would need my help. She said that Marcus had threatened to leave her and move to another state if she could not convince her family to support his business ventures. The sight of my confident, successful daughter kneeling on my carpet and begging for money was one of the most heartbreaking moments of my entire life. That night, I lay awake planning how I would handle the situation. I had decided to call both the police and my lawyer in the morning to explore my legal options for getting them out of my house and protecting my assets. I had also researched domestic violence resources, recognizing that Sarah's behavior showed signs of psychological abuse, even if there was no obvious physical violence. I knew that confronting Marcus would be dangerous, but I also knew that continuing to enable his behavior was destroying my daughter's life and threatening my own financial security. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. Marcus must have sensed that I was planning something because he woke me up at 6 a.m, demanding to know what I intended to do about their situation. When I told him that I had made my final decision and would not be providing any more money, he became enraged. I made the mistake of telling him that I knew about his previous marriages and his pattern of financial manipulation. This revelation sent him into a fury that I was completely unprepared for. Marcus grabbed my shoulders and shook me while shouting that I had no right to investigate his personal life. When I tried to step away from him, he pushed me backward with enough force to send me stumbling into the coffee table. My knee hit the corner hard enough to leave a bruise, and my arm was scraped by the table's edge as I fell. Sarah screamed and rushed to help me up, but Marcus yelled at her to stay away from me, saying that I had brought this on myself by being disrespectful and interfering in their marriage. In that moment, seeing my daughter's terrified face and feeling the pain from my injuries, I realized that I was no longer dealing with a difficult family situation, but with a dangerous criminal who had invaded my home. I picked up my phone and dialed 911 while Marcus was still ranting about family loyalty and respect. Sarah looked shocked that I was calling the police, but I knew that this situation had moved far beyond what I could handle on my own. Marcus tried to grab the phone from my hands, but I had already connected with the emergency operator and was requesting immediate assistance. Officer Johnson and Officer Martinez arrived within 15 minutes of my call, and their professional handling of the situation gave me confidence that I had made the right decision. They separated Marcus and me into different rooms to get our statements, photographed my injuries, and documented the damage to my coffee table where I had fallen. Marcus tried to charm the officers with explanations about family disagreements and misunderstandings, but his story fell apart when they asked specific questions about why he was living in my home and what had caused our argument. The officers arrested Marcus on charges of domestic violence and criminal trespassing, and as they put him in handcuffs, he shouted threats about how this would destroy Sarah's relationship with me forever. Sarah stood in the doorway, crying, clearly torn between protecting the man she had married and supporting the mother who had raised her. After Marcus was taken away, Sarah collapsed onto my couch and finally began telling me the truth about what her life had been like for the past 2 years. I called James Patterson, my family attorney, for the past 15 years and explained the situation in detail. He immediately scheduled an emergency appointment for that same afternoon and began outlining the legal steps we needed to take to protect both Sarah and me from further harm. James had handled my estate planning after David died, so he was familiar with my financial situation and understood how much I had at risk. He recommended filing for a restraining order against Marcus and beginning an investigation into the money that had already been transferred to him. During our meeting with James, we discovered that Marcus's financial crimes extended far beyond what had happened to our family. The attorney's investigator found evidence that Marcus owed $150,000 in gambling debts to several different casinos and had previously defrauded at least 3 other women through similar romantic relationships. One of his ex-wives had lost her entire retirement savings to his schemes, while another had been forced to sell her home to cover debts that Marcus had accumulated in her name. The legal process moved quickly once we had documented evidence of Marcus's pattern of fraud. James filed paperwork to freeze any assets that Marcus had acquired using money from Sarah or me, and we discovered that he had been hiding money in offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The investigation revealed that Marcus had transferred over $400,000 to these hidden accounts, including the money from Sarah's house sale and funds he had borrowed from his previous victims. Sarah's transformation once Marcus was out of the picture was remarkable and heartbreaking at the same time. She told me about 2 years of psychological manipulation, financial control, and emotional abuse that had gradually worn down her self-confidence and independence. Marcus had convinced her that her friends and family were jealous of their success and were trying to sabotage their marriage. He had monitored her phone calls, controlled access to their bank accounts, and threatened to hurt himself if she ever talked about leaving him. The restraining order was approved within 48 hours, and Marcus was released from jail with strict conditions that prohibited him from contacting either Sarah or me. He was also required to surrender his passport to prevent him from fleeing the country, while the criminal and civil cases moved forward. James worked with prosecutors to ensure that Marcus would face serious consequences for his crimes, while also pursuing civil remedies to recover as much of the stolen money as possible. Within a week of Marcus's arrest, we had uncovered enough evidence to file a comprehensive civil lawsuit demanding the return of the $155,000 that I had loaned to them, plus damages for the emotional distress and financial harm caused by his fraudulent schemes. James also connected us with other victims of Marcus's previous crimes, and we began building a class action case that would prevent him from victimizing anyone else in the future. The criminal trial took place 4 months later, and Marcus was sentenced to 2 years of probation with the requirement that he pay full restitution to all of his victims. The judge was particularly harsh in her sentencing remarks, noting that Marcus had specifically targeted women who were emotionally vulnerable due to recent divorces or deaths in their families. The civil case resolved more quickly, with Marcus agreeing to return $380,000 from his hidden offshore accounts, rather than face additional federal charges for money laundering. Sarah filed for divorce immediately after Marcus's arrest, and because of the criminal convictions, she was able to claim 60% of their marital assets, which consisted primarily of the money from their house sale that Marcus had not yet transferred overseas. The divorce was finalized within 6 months, and Sarah received enough money to start rebuilding her financial independence. She also received the legal protection of a permanent restraining order that would prevent Marcus from ever contacting her again. The most important part of Sarah's recovery was the professional help she received from Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a therapist who specialized in helping survivors of domestic abuse and financial manipulation. Through individual therapy sessions and a support group for domestic violence, Sarah began to understand how Marcus's psychological manipulation had gradually changed her personality and decision-making abilities. She learned that what she had experienced was a recognized pattern of abuse that had nothing to do with her intelligence or strength as a person. During the 8 months that Sarah lived with me while recovering from her marriage, our relationship grew stronger than it had been since she was a child. We had long conversations about the warning signs we had both ignored, and Sarah apologized repeatedly for putting me in danger and causing me to lose money. I assured her that my priority had always been her safety and well-being, and that the financial losses were far less important than having her back in my life as the confident, independent woman I had raised her to be. Sarah gradually reconnected with the friends she had lost touch with during her marriage, and many of them told her that they had been worried about her but did not know how to express their concerns. Her college roommate Lisa said that Marcus had been rude to her during their few interactions, and that Sarah had seemed like a different person when he was around. These conversations helped Sarah realize how completely Marcus had isolated her from her support system and changed her behavior in ways she had not recognized at the time. After 8 months of therapy and recovery, Sarah felt strong enough to move into her own apartment in downtown Denver. She chose a secure building with good lighting and multiple exits precautions that had become second nature after living with the constant threat of Marcus's unpredictable behavior. I helped her furnish the apartment and felt proud watching her make independent decisions about everything from wall colors to furniture placement. She was becoming herself again, but with a wisdom and strength that came from surviving something terrible. The private investigator that James had hired continued monitoring Marcus's activities even after the legal cases were resolved. We learned that Marcus was attempting to contact women through dating websites and social media using fake names and profiles to hide his criminal background. James worked with law enforcement to ensure that Marcus's probation officer was aware of these activities, which resulted in additional restrictions on his internet usage and social media access. The journey of healing from Marcus's betrayal and manipulation took much longer than I had expected, but it taught me valuable lessons about love boundaries and personal strength. For the first 3 months after Marcus was arrested, I struggled with insomnia and spent countless hours replaying every interaction, wondering how I could have recognized the warning signs earlier and protected Sarah from so much pain. I blamed myself for being too trusting and for prioritizing my daughter's happiness over my own instincts about Marcus's character. My own recovery began when I started attending therapy sessions with a counselor who specialized in helping family members of abuse survivors. Dr. Patricia Williams helped me understand that my desire to support Sarah had been manipulated by someone who was skilled at exploiting people's love and generosity. She taught me that recognizing manipulation after the fact does not mean I was stupid or weak, but rather that I had been targeted by someone who had perfected these techniques through years of practice. Gradually, I began rebuilding my sense of confidence and independence through activities that brought me joy and connected me with other people. I rejoined the yoga class that my friend Dorothy had been encouraging me to try for years, and the physical activity helped me sleep better and feel more grounded in my own body. I also returned to volunteering at the local animal shelter, where caring for abandoned and mistreated animals gave me a sense of purpose and reminded me that healing is possible even after severe trauma. One of the most therapeutic activities I discovered was taking painting classes at the community college near my home. I had always wanted to learn to paint, but had never made time for creative pursuits during my working years. The art classes gave me a way to express emotions that were difficult to put into words, and I found that creating something beautiful helped balance out the ugliness of what Marcus had brought into our lives. My instructor, Margaret, was a retired art teacher who had survived her own difficult divorce, and her encouragement meant more to me than she probably realized. 18 months after the ordeal with Marcus ended, Sarah had not only recovered her emotional and financial independence, but had grown into an even stronger and more self-aware person than she had been before her marriage. She received a promotion to marketing manager at her company, recognition that her professional skills had never been affected by the personal chaos in her life. Her confidence at work returned quickly once she was no longer constantly worried about Marcus's reaction to her success or fearful that her achievements might threaten his ego. Sarah also began dating again, though she was much more cautious and deliberate in her approach to relationships. She met Andrew, a software engineer, through a hiking group that she joined as part of her recovery process. I was initially worried about her getting involved with anyone new so soon, but Andrew proved to be everything that Marcus was not. He was genuinely interested in Sarah's thoughts and opinions, supportive of her career ambitions, and respectful of her relationship with me and her other family members and friends. Before introducing Andrew to me, Sarah had been dating him for 6 months and had observed how he treated service workers, how he talked about his ex-girlfriends, and how he handled stress and disappointment. She had learned to look for character traits that she had ignored when she met Marcus, and she insisted on maintaining her own apartment and financial independence even as their relationship became more serious. I was impressed by how thoughtfully she approached this new relationship, and I knew that her experience with Marcus had taught her to value herself enough to demand respect and honesty from anyone she allowed into her life. The most meaningful part of Sarah's recovery was her decision to become a volunteer advocate for other survivors of domestic violence and financial abuse. She began speaking at support groups and helping other women recognize the warning signs that she had missed in her own relationship. Her ability to transform her painful experience into something that could help other people showed me that she had not only survived Marcus's manipulation, but had found a way to create meaning and purpose from the trauma. These experiences taught me profound lessons about the nature of love and the importance of boundaries in all relationships. I learned that loving someone does not mean giving them everything they ask for or protecting them from the consequences of their decisions. Real love sometimes requires saying no, even when it causes short-term pain or disappointment. I realized that my willingness to loan Sarah money without asking hard questions had actually made it easier for Marcus to continue his manipulation and had delayed the moment when Sarah would be forced to confront the reality of her situation. I also learned to trust my instincts about people, even when my logical mind could not articulate exactly what felt wrong about a situation. From the first time I met Marcus, something about him had made me uncomfortable, but I had dismissed these feelings because I wanted Sarah to be happy and did not want to seem judgmental or interfering. Now I understand that these intuitive responses often contain important information that we ignore at our own peril. Perhaps most importantly, I discovered that at 57 years old, I was much stronger and more resilient than I had given myself credit for. When Sarah needed me to fight for her safety and well-being, I found reserves of courage and determination that I did not know I possessed. The process of standing up to Marcus, navigating the legal system, and supporting Sarah through her recovery showed me that age and grief had not diminished my ability to protect the people I love when they truly need me. I learned that forgiveness does not require forgetting or excusing someone's behavior, and that it is possible to let go of anger without pretending that serious harm was not done. I do not hate Marcus because I recognize that his ability to manipulate and exploit others likely stems from his own psychological damage and inability to form genuine connections with other people. However, I will never again ignore warning signs or fail to protect myself and my family from people who view relationships as opportunities for personal gain rather than mutual support and respect. The most important lesson I learned was that real love creates freedom rather than dependence, and that healthy relationships make people stronger and more confident rather than isolated and fearful. Watching Sarah regain her independence and self-confidence showed me that our ordeal with Marcus, as painful as it had been, had ultimately made both of us wiser and more capable of recognizing and nurturing genuine love in our lives. Perhaps you are thinking that my story ends here, but the truth is that this is really just the beginning. This is the beginning of Sarah and me learning how to love each other more wisely and with better boundaries. This is the beginning of both of us understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to enable their poor decisions or protect them from consequences that might teach them important lessons. If someone in your family is in a situation similar to what Sarah experienced, please remember that sometimes saying no is the most powerful way to say I love you. Real love is not about giving someone everything they want or ask for. Real love is about caring enough to protect people from harm, even when that means protecting them from their own choices. Because authentic love does not require you to sacrifice your own well-being or financial security to prove your devotion, and the people who truly love you will never ask you to put yourself in danger for their benefit. Have you or someone you know ever been in a situation where love was used as a weapon to manipulate you into making decisions that went against your better judgment? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like this video. If my story resonated with you, and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences that might help you navigate difficult situations in your own life. Share this story with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of boundaries in relationships, because sometimes the most important thing we can do for each other is to share our experiences so others can learn from both our mistakes and our victories. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope that sharing it helps you find the strength to trust your instincts and protect yourself and the people you love. May you always have the wisdom to know the difference between love that builds you up and manipulation that tears you down.